Welcome to the Decentralized Podcast, where we break down the world of Web3, digital assets, and DAOs with me, your host, Pietri Basson. In this episode of the Decentralized Podcast, we're having a conversation with Cyril Forte, the head of decentralization for Sandbox. And this is a really interesting conversation. We get into a little bit of the personal aspects, but then we do a deep dive into DAOs, how you do design them, how to design constitutions, voting, councils, and a lot of other very specific information. I had a lot of fun shooting this episode. I really hope you enjoy it as well. Cyril Forte, welcome to the Decentralized Podcast.
Thank you.
Head of decentralization for the Sandbox. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
So I was thinking we usually kick off somewhere a little bit different. I know when we had a conversation earlier, you mentioned that you sort of grew up in multiple military bases across the world, having an experience of, living in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
How would you say, how was that growing up? And then what have you learned from that helped you a lot further in life?
Definitely, it's a good question. I would say, with retrospect, as an adult, it was really eye-opening. As a teenager, it was much more difficult because you're always the new guy, right? You always have to fit in with a different group of individuals that don't really need you, that don't really are waiting for you any sort because they have their own group of friends and you're constantly new guys. So you have to get to know people, make your own little mark, create your own group of friends. And we were changing city and country every 2 to 3 years. So I have to redo this over and over and over till I reach 18. And I think I would say it helped my social skills a little bit because I'm kind of on the shy side of the spectrum. And as an adult, it really broadened my perspective to, get to meet new culture, people that are very different from you, and how do you see things from their point of view, and really opens up like your perspective.
That's interesting. I think a lot of the things when you're young, it's challenging.
Yeah.
And when you're older and you look back on it, you're like, okay, that was actually a really good experience.
Yeah. I'm grateful to my dad, to have choosing this career and give me this opportunity to live in so many cool countries. Like I was, surfing and then doing all kinds of stuff that not teenagers usually do that easily, because when you're in Africa, you're really close to the sea and everything is cheaper than it is in France, so you get more access to these sort of things. But I remember as a teenager this being really difficult because you're always the new guys. Depends where you are, but you can be in a minority, so it's different, right? You have to learn how to navigate those spaces.
No, that's I think the lessons you learn younger, you can implement later
applies
on.
to you as an adult.
So you're probably much more adaptable because of that.
I think so. Yeah. And I kept the bug, right? I've been traveling also for work further down the line. So
I actually want to get into that.
Okay.
I mean, you were at HSBC, you worked in Monaco, Geneva, and the UK.
Yes.
Now you're working with people internationally.
Correct, yeah.
How would you say international work is different? Because I think on the one side, there's the Western work culture versus more European work culture.
Yeah.
But then just generally between, even those three places.
I think it's fair to say that I've been exposed to international culture from the start, even when I started working in Monaco, because HSBC is just a global company. You have to work with people from everywhere, and they were already offshoring some of their functions. So from the start, you had to deal with tech being in Hong Kong and in Guangzhou in China. So already you had those cultural differences that you had to apprehend because they're different than we are, and the approach to work is different than we are. So you have to appreciate that. So very much from the start, I've been exposed to that, not necessarily living in those countries, but working with people that are vastly different, being part of the multinational company. You really have to appreciate those things quite quickly in your career.
And what would you say were some of the main challenges? Is it communication styles, sort of working hours? How you see the most challenging points?
So the English was sometimes an issue. I remember working with some developer that was hardcore, super competent guys, but couldn't speak English. Yep. So you had to bring a middleman to help with the translation. That was the first challenge. I would say the approach to autonomy was different. The way that when you give instruction, and as a French, we're biased, we give like an overall direction and we expect people to figure this out. It's different when you're working with other countries. Some people like to be more directed, so you have to adjust to that as well. Also the time difference, right? The fact that people are waking up later than you, earlier, sorry, than you in the case of Asia, that sort of things. You also have to react on this and adjust your own time zone and make an effort. They make an effort, so you meet in the middle.
Okay, so you've actually been working internationally for ages, because in sort of the digital asset industry, that's one of the challenges, is people are everywhere and you're working with them all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And but then I had the chance, moving on to Geneva, and I was basically living in a hotel for 2 years.
Okay.
Because I was coming home. So I was living in Nice, working in Monaco, and I was coming home every weekend. But I was traveling on Monday, back on Friday, sometime on Thursday. To calm down a little bit and enjoy a little bit my place, because I couldn't really, because I was constantly living in a hotel. But again, you get confronted to different people, because Geneva is you get the French side, the Italian side, and the German side, I would say, in Switzerland. So it's a mix of culture in itself, Switzerland. So again, another challenge. But it's all good in the end. It's people are trying to do good work, and you have to appreciate those differences that you don't necessarily realize exist when you start. But then you like, the more you work with people, like, oh, okay, I now understand where you're coming from with this. And that's because the way you work and the way you approach a problem is basically different from the French, which is my culture. And that helps you grow as a professional.
No, I think that's putting yourself in other person's perspective.
Yeah.
Everyone has good intentions, but different ways of getting there.
Yeah.
That's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
It's really hard saying, okay, I know you want to do good, but this is not the right way.
Yeah.
You then went over to Alliance Partners, where you were sort of global product head for digital.
Yeah.
But then after that, you decided to start your own thing,
Yes.
and getting to digital asset side. So
Yes.
what made you decide to make that move? I mean, you were very well established. That's a pretty good position.
It's a good question, but basically I've discovered product management on the last, I discovered the agility in HSBC, right? And helped implemented the agility in Geneva, become product manager in London, and gradually work my way up the chain in London. And when I went back to Paris for the first time, actually, first time working in France, was for Allianz Partner in Parity. I was overseeing a whole suite of digital assets for the Allianz Partner. And I realized that I always thought that I will achieve something by just working my way up the ladder, and I will be more in charge or autonomous by working my way up the ladder. And that was always my goal. And it was always frustrating to always have somebody above my head making decisions and telling me what to do. I'm like, okay, I want to be the one making the decisions and tell people what to do, so that way I will feel fulfilled. And I realized it was not true, because there's always somebody above you. There's always somebody that will tell you what to do. And the only way to gain that sort of autonomy is perhaps to become independent and become your own man. So you get, even if you have a customer that has a request, which is technically your boss, you get to be more autonomous by picking up your missions, your clients, etc. So I came very much from this Web2 environment, and you will see how, when we talk about the DAO, that transpire into my approach into building this DAO. But I also realized that I want to work closely with tech. And I realized that all of my background was tech, but the work that I was doing in product management, was for financial services. And I got afraid of being too tied up too deeply with financial services. And I want to be exploring, and I want to have the chance to explore other industries as well. So I said, okay, what's the best way to do that? Maybe it's to become independent, which was a huge bet, because, you got a mortgage and you got a kid. So what do, right? So you have to think this through and make sure it's not too much of a gamble on yourself. So, and I was at the same time paying attention to crypto, and I was basically doing pro bono work in crypto, trying to learn my ways in, starting to work on DAOs, and I would say in decentralized governance in general, because we wouldn't necessarily have a token, but we were looking at the principle of decentralized organization already, and trying to learn more and more about crypto, which was scary at first. I was like, what the hell is this? This like a whole bunch of stuff that looks a bit unregulated and scary from an outside, an ignorant person. So I got really much attracted to that, because I knew nothing about it. So I decided to really study it and really, pay attention, and started my own company, look for customers, do a bit of coaching on the side, coaching in product management and management in general. And then I got the opportunity to work at the Sandbox.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you were doing some consulting work, dealing with DAOs a little bit. What was your first sort of step into the world of DAOs, the first time you actually interacted with it?
Well, it was during this pro bono stuff
Okay.
when we were actually okay. How we can organize ourselves and be eat our own bread, if I would say. We were a collective that were about promoting Web3 and now AI and those sort of things, and how we can apply our own principle and how we can organize ourselves in a decentralized way. So I was like, okay, that looks cool. I can look into that, and I can see. I'm obviously working with other people as well. What can we do? Like how we can make this work? And that's basically how I started building my knowledge around that stuff. And the funny things about DAO and about people like us that works on DAO, you don't learn that stuff in school. There's no training anywhere. It kind of just happen, and you stumble upon it, and you pay attention, and all of a sudden you're like the expert, right? And that was the same thing in Web 2 15, 20 years ago, right? Which is funny, which is basically about like how do you apply common sense to a problem? Like, do you have the basic skill set that will help you navigate that space and make it work? And that's how the Sandbox found me. It's like, okay, we're really looking to do this. We think you've got the skill set. Yes, you've got some prior experience, but you never done it at the same level, at the same scale. But we trust you to do it, so let's do it together.
No, it's very true. I've got so many people who've asked me, what course should I do, what book should I read, etc. I'm like, there is no course or no book. You need to be very curious, and you need to keep on learning. That's the only way to actually get into it. The one thing I wanted to ask you, because you worked in Web 2, very traditional. Now you're very sort of DAO native Web 3. What would you say are the main differences you've seen between those environments and working in them?
I'd say the people are very different. There's no degen equivalent in Web 2. I think Web 2 is much more grown up. Not to say it's a bad thing or a good thing, but just what I appreciate. Like, I was in NFC Lisbon when we announced DAO, and I saw the people I was interacting with. The Web 2 traditional world that I came from is much more traditional, suit and tie, that kind of stuff. These are the type of event we do. And then all of a sudden you're on NFC Lisbon when everybody's like, let's fucking go, and everybody's hyped up, and everybody's 20 years old and a CEO of his own project. It's so refreshing, so different. And I found it very much like I was attracted to that because it's so dynamic, even though I'm not 20s anymore for quite some time. But I thought it very, inspiring. It inspired me also to join that group of, cool people and trying to be like, dynamic as well, and push the boundaries and really have that pioneer mentality that you don't actually see with the same extent in the Web 2 world, which is established for quite some time. This is the internet world. This is the SAS world. This is very much established for quite some time. Stuff is documented. Practice is documented. We're talking about product management. There's course to become product management now. You can really teach that stuff. When in Web3, it feels a bit more like the Far West, but in a good way, in a pioneer way. Like, you get to create a new paradigm. You get to work on what's the new norm is going to be. You're part of that group of people. And as an engineer, it's fascinating because you create something from scratch. You don't apply existing tools to a new problem. You just create your own tools, which is very much different.
No, I think I personally also, I was in big companies, you had all the structure, all that, but there's a lot of frustrations. As you were saying, you've got a boss, you've got certain ways to do things, you can't just innovate. And that's what's so, refreshing in this space, is if you see a problem, you can fix it. There's not a process to be able to allow you to do that. You can just go fix that problem, and you work with really smart people. I have to say that's
because everybody's curious. Because, like I said, there's no course. So you have to read, you have to document yourself. So you really have that gymnastic in your mind. So the people that you've met are constantly curious, constantly challenging themselves, asking questions, and it's really inspiring.
No, I think a lot of it is new as well. There's not something that you can say this is like. You need to a lot of it is brand new thinking, which is especially on the DAO side. We'll get into governance, design, all those kinds of things, but you're taking older concepts, but applying them in very new ways when you get into it. Before we get into the DAO space, the one thing I wanted to ask you about is you're a single dad.
Yes.
So firstly, hats off to you. That is very impressive. What are some of the challenges between work and then being a single dad that you face?
Time management, I would say, is the first one. Like, for example, like, how do you cope with the 7 p.m. meeting when you're supposed to feed your daughter? Oh, okay, who's going to take care of her, right? So it's about organizing. It's about preparing meal in advance. It's about making sure she's got some a puzzle to do, or she will be autonomous for at least an hour. So you can do your meeting, and it's really like it maximizes your organization skills. It's really about time management. Like when I wake up in the morning, I have to make sure she's ready, she's fed, she's cleaned up, she's has decent clothes, even though sometimes like, I take some shortcut, and my fashion sense is a bit off, as you can tell. So it's kind of my daughter is paying the price of that. But it's really about and some parents, even not single parents, they talk about the tunnel. Like when you go home and you're in the tunnel, which means from 6 to 20, this is all about your kids, making sure you got there, they get the shower, they brush their teeth, or they eat, they brush their teeth, they do like they have a bed story, etc., etc., etc. You have time to decompress, you have time to interact with them. So it's really about managing your time. And I get to learn some stuff from her as well. Like we were joking about this, but difficult stakeholder management is a key skills that you get to improve being in contact with a 4-year-old. Like, Daddy, I want this, but no, you can't just have sweets for dinner. Yeah, but I want the sweets. All right, okay, let's talk about this.
Negotiation skills.
Some negotiation skills, like dealing with irrational people. So it's something you learn to do. But it's fulfilling, and I'm glad to had a chance to, carry on taking care of my daughter, and I'm very, it's going along well, and yeah, it's an experience as well, like changing curriculum and moving from, like you were saying, a very established position, starting your own company, learning about a new space, also being a single dad. So yeah, it's been a journey, but we're learning as you go, and we're stabilizing things as you go, and it's very cool. She's nice. I'm lucky.
No, that's awesome. I think it's what's really cool is the things you can learn from personal life that you can implement in your professional life. We were talking earlier about communities and working with lots of people. I mean, if you can handle a 4-year-old, you can handle a bunch of people on the internet. So
Yeah,
it's very good transferable skills.
Yeah,
You've
indeed.
learned patience probably.
Exactly, and how to learn with people that change their mind very often, like a toddler would do. It is interesting, and I think in every walks of life you can always apply stuff that you learn in your personal life to your job, like with your own personal interactions. And we were saying, like, in my life, I had the chance to travel a lot. I've learned some things along the way. I've learned how to interact with a group of people that are completely strangers, and perhaps break the ice a little bit, or perhaps get to see things from their perspective. It really helps. Like when you start as a product manager, we used to call it business analyst at first, which was the bridge between tech and business, right? These functions, not so much called business analyst anymore in the world of agility, but the job still exists, right? And you really have to be this bridge between two group of people that do not necessarily understand each other. And you have to navigate that dichotomy constantly, and that schizophrenia constantly. Like, the tech is about stability and having a code base that is clean, that is maintainable, and business is about opportunity and growing fast. And there's an opportunity there, let's do that. Oh, but we don't know how to do it, says tech. Yeah, but you figure it out. So how do you reconcile these two approaches? I would say these skills that you learn from just life, right? But you have to have an appetite for it as well.
Yeah, no, and I think it's very interesting how those skills then will transfer into running a DAO, sort of what you're doing now. Maybe if we take a step back, I'd like to almost get your interpretation for people who don't know what a DAO is.
Okay.
How would you describe it? What is a DAO?
Okay, it's a group of people. So Decentralized Autonomous Organization, DAO. It's basically how do you organize a group of people, and how do you reinvent democracy through the usage of token, for better or worse. Because I think democracy is like 2,000 years old, or more than 2,000 years old, and we're trying to reinvent it with token and software management. So it's an interesting exercise. But how do you make a group of people that do not necessarily have shared interest, common ground, past or perspective, could be completely dissimilar, and how do you get these people to work together to achieve a common goal? And how do you make sure these people are represented in a way that is as democratic as possible, as fair as possible, and leverage crypto and the fact that, every information that is on the blockchain cannot be hacked and they can be traced back. The decision making can be traced back. So you get that level of transparency. I think on a DAO has to be built on transparency, otherwise it never work. And I think that's the foundational, and that's how you can bring a group of people that do not necessarily trust each other, like the Byzantine general problem that we all know and love, how to get this group of people to work together and achieve a common goal. So first of all, what's the common goal? And then how do you group people around that? No. That's what the DAO is about, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think for me, it's almost the next iteration of how human beings work together. We started, in tribes, evolved through companies, countries, democracy.
Yeah.
But one of the problems with democracy is it's a set term. So 4 years, you vote for one person and they decide what's good for you.
Yeah.
I think this is much more live feedback.
Yeah.
Pro and con to live feedback.
Indeed.
But I think it's a very interesting experiment. But the interesting thing that you mentioned is the transparency, the inclusiveness, the accountability. I mean, everything is there. Anyone can see what's going on.
Exactly. And there's no corruption, right? There's the ultimate power ultimately corrupt. In a DAO, we're trying to mitigate against that by being fully transparent. So people, they kind of know, okay, this is eventually in a DAO, you get to vote on stuff. Like that's the common ground between all of the DAO. Some DAOs are DeFi protocols, some others are pure charity. We're doing also something different in the Sandbox, but eventually you have to vote on proposals. But having that transparency and that accountability ground helps people being like, okay, my vote matter. And I know, like when I trust this group of individual and I give a yes to, and I cast my vote and I say, yes, I believe into this. If the yes wins, I kind of know how this is going to be implemented and I can follow it, rather than in the traditional world, in the democracy, sometimes a bit more difficult to understand. Okay, I've elected that president and he's promised a bunch of stuff, but how is he held accountable against that bunch of stuff? Much more complex. But I will balance that by saying it's also very hard to reinvent democracy. I mean, DAO has been existing for, let's say, how long as Ethereum exists, I would say, when democracy is much older. So democracy had the chance to make many, many mistakes and learn from these mistakes. And perhaps the form that we've got today is the best possible form, where we think we can do better with DAO. But how dare us? You know what I mean? Like, how dare we reinvent something that is 2,000 years old, that has been battle tested multiple times? But it's also interesting to challenge the status quo, but not forget that there's probably people who had the same questions that we do now 1,000 years ago. Just it was nothing to do with crypto, but they had the same questions. Like, okay, how do we need delegate? Or it's a democratic process, but we still need delegates. So how do you balance that? So it's very interesting, really.
No, I think and it's probably a mistake that we make in DAO design a lot of times. We're trying to design from zero.
Yeah.
But you've got a few hundred years plus of democracy to learn from, and we probably forget some of those lessons.
Yeah.
There's a reason why some things need to be centralized.
I
mean, I think when I started with this space, a lot of people were very, the community is going to decide on everything. Everything's going to be a vote. But you sort of get community fatigue. The community shouldn't be voting on spending $1,000.
Correct.
So, I mean, when you got the directive of Sandbox, you got that, and you started looking at designing this. Where did you start, almost going through the design for the DAO? And then what's going to be a vote? How much is democratic? How much is a council? The full sort of setting up the constitution.
So it was a spectrum, right? So I navigated between not so decentralized to fully decentralized. Okay, what's the pros and cons on being on the left? What's the pros and cons on being on the right? And where's the happy medium? So being fully decentralized, this could be the far west, but not in a good way. Like to my previous example, where there's no common vision and people are to a point egotistical at some point, right? If I start taking food off your table, you're going to be mad at me very quickly, right? So fundamentally, I would say people, if you push them, they become egotistical, rightfully so, because that's our primal directive. We want to take care of us and our family before anything else. So how do we reconcile that with the common project? But if you are too centralized, then it's not truly a DAO. This a body of people deciding for the community without necessarily consulting them. So my challenge was always to navigate that space and be like, okay, can we design a system that is democratic recognizing that people are more invested than other in the ecosystem. How do you reward that? How do you make sure these people get a voice? And how do you make sure that when you have a constitution, the constitution still makes sense and still inspire people to join your DAO and still give a clear vision of what you're doing so you can gather people. And I think it's difficult because you want to make sure people show up. You want to make sure people are interested by what you're doing. Like the worst that can happen to a DAO is nobody show up. Nobody votes because nobody care about your DAO. Nobody care about your proposal. Nobody care about you doing. And I think at the Sandbox, we had the chance to have a very strong brand and a very strong vision for what the Sandbox as a product is, right? This decentralized metaverse where you can own your piece of land and you can build your own your own game, and you get rewarded for your own game, and you own your creation. So there's a very strong proposal there. But what's the DAO can do for that community of people, what the DAO can do for the Sandbox. So taking that on board as well, that is this is not coming from the void. This is the Sandbox DAO. Mm-hmm. This is not a DAO. So what's the lineage between the two, and how the DAO can serve the Sandbox also dictated how I've shaped this whole thing up.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, when you shaped it, you guys set up a council, which I think is a very good idea. Big proponent of councils. Mm-hmm. And you had to decide sort of with that initial council who to put on there.
Yeah.
How did you think around, which individuals, what kind of background, etc., and then maybe just generally, how does it work afterwards? How long does the council serve? How are they re-elected?
It was a tough one, to be honest, because my first initial reaction is, let's get anybody that is motivated enough to serve on the council and know a little bit about crypto and at least has an opinion on things and can help us drive this forward. And then it was like, okay, this whole concept is so new. I'd like to have the council. I'd like to have a member of the council. And to be honest, I wasn't the only one deciding that stuff, right? We consulted with the Sandbox management team, with a party. We really looked it through and really cast people. We really had, I had proper job interviews for people to join the council. Like, okay, what do you want to, if you join the council, what would you bring to the table? What makes you a good candidate? So again, me doing interview to people that are much more successful than me, smarter than me, and they were like around the table. I was like, okay, tell me what you're going to do for us and what's going to be like. Yep. It was awesome, right? And people, what I realized is the people are super humble. If you interview like very smart and successful people, they will not come across as arrogant, and they will not tell you, how dare you interview me, I'm clearly more successful than you are. People were like super humble, and they were like, yeah, I want to join a cool project, and I believe in DAOs in general, or I'm super interested, and I want to do more in the space. And you have to look at these people like, okay, what's your curriculum? What actually can you bring to the table? And then you realize that these people are what I call captain of industries. Like they have an entrepreneur background. They've done a lot for in the crypto space before. They're really known. They're trusted people. So you do peer review. And it's like, okay, I believe we can work together. And you cross-reference them. Okay, do you know this other council? Making sure there's no possible collusion. But you still want people to get along, but you want also people to challenge themselves, because you don't want to have everybody with the same opinions and constantly thinking about about things the same way. You want debate. That's what the council is about. The council will provide a recommendation, but I want them to debate. So that's how we've assembled this group of people. And obviously we've got Sebastien and Yat on the council as well, which shows lineage with the Sandbox. So our council is Sebastien, so the co-founder of the Sandbox. Yat is the chairman of Animoca, which the Sandbox is a subsidiary of. Yeah, we've got Shannon Snow, which is the CEO of World of Women. Jean-Michel Payon, which is an ex-executive at Ledger, who founded his own company called Great Capital, looking after NFTs. And we've got Frédéric Montagnon, which is founder of AI and crypto space, and is also like a seasoned investor, right? So all of these people, very smart people in the crypto space, do not necessarily know each other. But I want to acknowledge the fact that this is the Sandbox DAO, and very much so would appreciate having somebody from the Sandbox sitting at the council. So at least in the short term, there's some lineage. And because the council is really here to help set up the vision and get us started. And I don't want to start completely from scratch. I mean, this is the Sandbox DAO. So to me, it made sense to have these people from the Sandbox, and perhaps we'll talk about this, but the responsibility of the council and the power of the council is super limited, really, really limited. But it's still, to me, worth it a lot by having people from the Sandbox that can bring this to the table, that can still make sure the baton is being passed and carry on that vision to the DAO as well, because this is the Sandbox DAO. So that's how, to answer your question, we've approached into assembling the council.
Okay. No, and I think the council is very important because I've had this with other DAOs and foundations where if you don't have a council, you don't have someone setting the direction. There's sort of shiny object syndrome. The community, we should be focusing on this, and then the team starts building, and then, oh no, let's focus on this thing. So I think it's very important, and having that lineage, as you say, because it's already a successful brand, the guys know what they're doing, etc. They can bring that experience to the council, have a conversation with them, work through it. With your council, how does re-election work? So how long is the council sitting? And then do you sort of have a handover period between the council to the next council, etc.? Because if it's 5 people and 5 brand new people, you might lose a little bit of that.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I haven't thought about that at first. And I was discussing with the ApeCoin DAO people, and they say we are renewing our council 2% at a time. So there's always the OG that can pass the baton to the new guys. And I was like, it's a good idea. Perhaps I should do that. But to be honest, haven't thought this through. So for now, the council is a fixed term mandate. So first council has been chosen for a year and a half because we started our DAO in the middle of the year. So I wanted to give them a 1.5-year mandate. The new council will be elected from the community. So they won't be chosen by us. And I'm expecting people to campaign and really the community to choose the best council. But again, we wanted to have these captain of industry and the lineage with the Sandbox at first to get us going. And that's also why the mandate is a bit longer, so to get time to really do stuff. But to your point, in theory, in December, the 5 council goes and it will be replaced. And I think that's not necessarily a good thing, but that's what's great about DAOs is you think about stuff and then you realize there's better options. And as you learn as you go, because there's no blueprint, there's no recipe, like, oh, okay, this is interesting, and perhaps we should do that. So this is probably something we'll look at. This will probably be a revision of the constitution at some point. The community will have to vote, will have to agree on those changes. And again, even if the council is nominated for a fixed term, they can always be booted out for several reasons if they start behaving, engaging in illegal activities or being medically crazy, which I hope, touching wood, it will never happen to them. But you know what I mean? They can there's like rules to replace them, and the community wants to, they can always, vote against them, but they will have to reach quorum, and it's a constitutional SIP, so there's a higher quorum, etc., etc. But there's rules in place to rotate the council. But it's a very good point. I think we should explore that. And I'm very happy to have this DAO off the ground. But now coming from the product background is like, let's get something live, small first that works and improve upon it. Because otherwise you get nothing delivered. You constantly gold plating stuff forever and you get nothing live. So this is typically, okay, we've got a council, we've got a set of rules that are coherent, but we can do better. So let's do better now that we have a council live, instead of, let's think about this for another month and delay the DAO launch for another month because we haven't thought about everything. So that was our approach for this DAO really from the start.
And that's the nature of the space. It's impossible to design it correctly the first time. You're always learning, always iterating. And the sooner you sort of embrace that, the better. You mentioned constitutional SIP. So how have you guys structured it at the moment? What are your levels of SIP? What is required for each one? What can you do with different? So to change the constitution.
So we wanted to have a different quorum from the constitution. I'm exploring it because it's not technically possible via snapshot. So for the moment, it's the same quorum for all SIP, but I would like to have a different quorum. And again, we'll have to ask the community about that. But I like to have some SIPs that are more difficult. So SIPs is a Sandbox improvement proposal, by the way. This is a typical proposal for the Sandbox. This is something we've been exploring, is like, do we need to have a different quorum? And I think you mentioned Arbitrum. Arbitrum has 2 different quorum in their constitution for constitutional SIPs versus regular SIPs. So that's also something we've inspired, that was inspiring for us when we designed this constitution. Is like, okay, is some stuff more difficult than to change than other? Is it democratic to say so, or everything should be up for grabs? Because again, balancing between not decentralized and fully decentralized, if everything is up for grabs, nothing gets done. And you can end up in a state where you're constantly running in circles and a group of people can undo what has been done by the previous one constantly, and you never achieve anything. So, but then you can't be not democratic and say this is set in stone, it cannot be changed forever, and actually this has been decided by a group of two. No, it doesn't work as well. So it's always like, how do you balance left and right? How do you find the happy medium, and how do you navigate that space? And there's no recipe to do that. There's no guidelines or playbook you can follow. You're kind of learning as you go. And I think we rely a lot also on our community. I think every community on any given Web3 project is different. They care about different stuff. And the feedback we've got from the community also made us think about, okay, how can we do this better, and how can we improve upon? So yeah.
No, I think what you get into is very important, because there should be some decisions that are hard. So if I'm fundamentally changing the product or completely changing what the DAO does or spending 50% of the treasury, that shouldn't be easy. But then there are some things where you want to be able to move quicker, easier quorums, easier to manage.
Yeah.
I mean, the tooling is getting there.
Yeah.
We'll have tooling where you can be specific, or you can just set up separate snapshots for separate specific things.
Exactly.
And get everyone to vote.
Things.
Yeah,
exactly.
it complicates. So, I mean, at the moment, it's almost to the product point that you mentioned.
Yeah, you're also limited, which is a pragmatic approach, right? You want to get some stuff like, okay, what do? I'm going to design a website from scratch. I'm going to leverage a no-code tool. I'm going to design a voting system from scratch. Or is there anything that can speed this up? Okay, the snapshot that exists. Snapshot is used in many DAOs. It's probably better, or other tools that we could look at, but this one seems to do the job for us. Can we set up multiple quorum? Not really. Okay, but it's something we'd like to explore. I also wanted to explore SIPs with no quorum at all. For like, there's for example for game jams, which is stuff we do at the Sandbox. When you said there's a theme, there's like a Halloween themes. People go in there and they create an experience, and then the best experience win cash prize in Sam. Do we need quorum for that? That's interesting, because you just need to pick up the 10 best proposal, and the first one gets the highest pool price, and then you work your way down the chain. Do we need to have 1,000 people voting for it to be efficient?
You almost need just a majority win.
Exactly. That's probably enough. So you see how constitutional SIP, we need a higher quorum. Regular SIP, we need like a 1% or 3% quorum based on the total voting power. And other SIP, maybe we don't need any quorum at all. So we're conscious of all of that stuff, but we cannot over-engineer all of these rules from the start, because we never get anything delivered. So my approach was, let's get something out. Let's see how the community react. And now that we have this core foundation of a constitution and rules in place, like, how can we build this now hand in hand with the community to make it better? Perhaps the community will tell me, no, we do want to have a quorum systematically. That's also interesting. And why? So now I think it's time to explore a bit more with the community and adjust those rules as we go.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what I've seen before as well, is a lot of people are afraid of some centralization in the start with the council, etc. They want to be at that far spectrum, but each community is different. And there is no one size fits all. That's what's always difficult when we're working with clients. They're like, just tell us what to do. I'm like, I can't really tell you what to do. There's some principles to apply here, but you're going to have to work with your community, see what are the things that you're making decisions on, because that's also another question. Each project is, what are the decisions that we should be making? There's constitutional stuff, voting, all those kinds of points, but then what are the other things? So game jams, for example, that's something very specific for you guys to make decisions on.
Exactly.
And that's unique to each project.
Yeah, exactly. It's unique to the Sandbox. And we've got the GMF going on, which is another, where the GMF is more like a specific request, like we want somebody to build a tower defense game because we want to promote this new feature to the game maker. The game maker is a no-code software that is put in the hands of any creator, so they can build their own experience. We could have those challenges, and we can reward for those challenges. I think it's typical to the Sandbox. But other stuff, it's more common. For example, do we believe in this NFT collection? Do we want to buy this NFT collection? Do we want to give a grant to a given charity? This could apply to any DAO, right? It doesn't have to be the Sandbox DAO for it to be meaningful. Like everybody in the DAO space know about NFTs, know about that there's some smart investment to do there, or there's some not so smart investment to be done, but still very culturally relevant. So therefore, you still need to be in the space. And all of this decision could apply to many DAOs. So yeah, you have to try to anticipate what is the type of proposal you're going to get, and trying to build rules that fits them all, but also recognize the fact that you cannot anticipate for everything, and stuff is going to hit you in the face, and you just have to figure it out.
Yeah, that's the fun part about this space. There's always something that's going to hit you in the face, and you'll
True.
roll with it and learn and move on. One of the interesting things that you guys did is, I mean, Sand, you've got the token, but you've also got the land.
Yeah.
And you guys have decided that you can vote with your land as well. There's a certain allocation. So can you maybe just talk about that decision, how that works?
Of course, it was an easy decision. In fact, the hard decision was, how do we value land? So we wanted to value land from the start, but the question is, what is the voting power we give to a landowner? So you can purchase land today, as anybody can purchase under the regular raffle. You can also purchase it on the secondary market. So there's a community that owns land that don't do anything with it, just as an investment. It's a community that own lands are very active because they're game creators, so it's important for them to own their land so they can deploy their own game. It's people that don't own land at all. They're just players or investors that just buy Sand because they want to interact with the game. They want to buy some cool avatar. They believe in the project. So for them, Sand is an investment and they want to see Sand growing up. So we got different type of persona. So we had to identify those persona. Okay, we've got players, creators, real estate people, like landowners, if you want. And then we had different behaviors amongst those personas. And how are you fair to these people? How do you give them a certain voting power without giving too much privilege to one group versus another, against back to the exercise of democracy? How do you reconcile people with different interests, with different different vision, towards different approach towards the sandbox as a company, or towards the game? And our vision was always, okay, landowner are really people that are a bit deeper into the ecosystem, because the land is more expensive than a sand. We take it as an extra commitment. Like, okay, you want to buy a piece of land, okay, you're a bit deeper in the ecosystem. So for us, these are really important people. So how do you value people? How do you value those people? By associating a voting power to a piece of land. So my challenge was, because we always said we won't have landowner with a certain voting power, how do we calculate for that voting power? Do we give them 1 million? Do we give them 2? What's the happy medium? And I went from 1,000 to 100,000. That was my spectrum. Very easily, a land is around 1,000 sand, not exactly, but to simplify. And there's also land that are a bit more expensive, premium land. And then it depends if you buy a cluster of land. It's a whole pricing model. And if Snoop Dogg is your neighbor, obviously your land's more expensive, like in the real world.
Yes.
So again, even in the landowner community, you see people have land that do not have the same value. So if I give 1,000 multiplier to a landowner, because the land is an NFT, if I give it a multiplier 1,000, is it fair to people that have land that's worth much more? But if I give 100,000 to everybody, is it fair to the sand owners that don't necessarily have land? And are we artificially shifting power too much towards the landowner? So we had to come up with like a simulation in Google Sheets, like a very fancy tool, and we ran multiple scenarios, and we ended up with 4,500 is our multiplier for landowner, which is roughly equivalent to a premium land. Premium land is around the 4,000 mark as of today. That might change in the future, but that was kind of also our basis for establishing that number. And we thought, running our simulation, that it gives a good balance of power between sand and landowners. And also you realize that there's a lot of sand owners that also have a piece of land. They just don't happen to have 10,000 lands, but they do have a couple of lands. So for them, it's a nice bonus as well to have this being recognized. And as a multiplier, it gives them more voting power, and also cross to blockchain, Ethereum and Polygon. So these are all of the strategies we've implemented in a snapshot to recognize for all of these people. But again, we are challenged. We will continue to be challenged, but I think we put some thought into it, made a proposal, and then let's see what the community thinks about it. If the majority think it's a terrible idea, it's a wrong number, we'll change it, because that's now how that works. Like, we can always change a rule, but we wanted to start somewhere, and we've done some homework to get there. But now it's up to the community.
No, and I think you have to set a baseline.
Yeah.
I mean, I can hear you guys have thought about it a lot. But then from that baseline, now the community can sort of decide. They can submit SIPs and go through it.
Yeah.
With the SIP, how do you make sure that you've got a high quality SIP?
That's a good question.
That's the challenge we've seen a lot.
And my strategy, so again, coming back to the product world, I've always said I'm going to approach this DAO as a product. And in the product world, you realize that there's incremental delivery. It's a core aspect of everything you do. You put some stuff in front of your community, of your user base. Could be internal staff, could be customer if you're working on a B2C product, or in the case of a DAO, it's the community of sand and landowner in general. You put a product out there, you see how the community reacts, and you improve upon it. And we apply the same principle, what we call progressive decentralization, which means we are not totally decentralized at first. There's still a little bit of hand-holding. Having the founder on the council is part of progressive decentralization. Having the budget not being, the totality of the reserve of the budget being allocated on the DAO from day one. It's a very limited, reasonable amount, 15.5 million sand for until December. Then it will get renewed to 25 million next year. But you see, these are reasonable amounts. It's not like 500 million, sorry. Again, in the optics of progressive decentralization, how we give power to the community, but still hold their hands until they're ready to go. I'm talking about my daughter. That's something I learned as well.
Yep.
I wanted to remove the tiny wheels, from her bicycle too soon. And it was a terrible idea, because she got disgusted of riding a bike. She didn't want to ride a bike because I went too quickly. I wanted to get to the next step too quickly. No, actually, the tiny wheels are here for a purpose, or maybe there's another solution, with the push bike. And before she can graduate to a, grown-up bike. So that's the kind of stuff you learn about having a daughter, a small baby as well. And we're applying the same. We're not saying the community are babies, not at all, but the principle of hand-holdings and guiding the community till we mature together as a group, till we're ready to fly with our own wings. These are the principle of progressive decentralization. And what was your question again? Sorry.
How do you do quality SIPs? How do you actually make sure?
And that's why, I went full circle there. That's why we've got the project management team.
Yes.
And it's embedded in the of the operation services that the DAO has. There's a project management team that will review every SIP. So it's not like anybody can propose anything and this will be up to a vote instantly. No, there's actually only moderator can create SIP on snapshot. And if you want to create a SIP, there's an email address. You can reach out to the project management team, and there's a template you have to follow. So we're mandating a certain template. Again, perhaps it's imperfect, but it's there. It exists. It gets people started. When we ask the question of why we should be doing this, how you plan to do this, how much do you want, what's your KPIs, how are we going to measure success, how are we going to deliver payment in stages, how are we going to interact with you, who are you, why we should trust you, all that kind of stuff. And can you explain your project in layman's terms in a TLDR and then detail it a bit further? What's your timeline? Is there an ROE to what you're doing, a return on investment? We force the SIP author to ask themselves all of these questions and write them in an intelligent way so they can be picked up and consumed by the community. But the project management team is here for now to help curate those proposals. So they work hand in hand with the author, which is people with a great idea, sometimes selfish interests, sometimes legitimate interests. So we kind of filter those people out. Sometimes when you realize, okay, but when I asked you why the Sandbox DAO should be doing this, if you're not able to answer, then there's probably a problem, right? You're not really here for the DAO. You're just here for the money grab. But it's not. It's not censorship per se. It's more like guidance, right? It's really like we take every proposal in, but we want to make sure people have stuff on to vote. The SIPs that we've got are of good quality, especially because they're going to establish they're going to be the baseline going forward. They're going to be, people are going to look at past SIPs and go, okay, what does SIPs that is well written look like? Okay, this SIP's got a lot of traction. There's a lot of people that voted on there. There was a lot of comments. There was a lot of, it's a huge success. The yes won by a huge majority. Why? Okay, now I can see what's well documented. So now hopefully I can replicate or try to replicate that recipe to a new SIP. And if every SIP is this way, I think we've got a successful DAO, because now we've got content that people are interesting to vote on, that is well written, in an intelligible way, in a professional way, been accompanied by people that are professional project manager that can help you size up the cost. Because so far we've got professional proposing SIPs, but tomorrow we can have individual proposing SIPs that do not necessarily know a lot about software delivery. Like, how do you size up a project? How do you build a team? How do you make sure, this is reasonable or feasible? We are providing that service to the community. We help them out, write their own SIP. And our objective is to have, good quality along when it comes to a vote. But again, to the principle of progressive decentralization, and that's why I went to this whole tangent here, is that we'll see if this service needs to be provided ad vitam aeternam forever. Like, we are hoping eventually that the Sandbox DAO will be mature enough to self-regulate, or to that the SIP that are not correctly written will be automatically and quickly rejected, to avoid wasting community resources, to avoid wasting people's time. We are hoping that we will get there eventually. But for now, we are accompanying people and we are helping them to have good quality content being pushed out for vote. So that's the service the admin team of the DAO is providing.
No, I've seen this being a challenge as well, where if you don't have a structure to your SIP, you get, one-liner type SIPs, people asking for very big amounts, or even what I've seen with some grants is, give me all the money up front, which I think 2 years ago is a lot of grants. You saw grants being issued with no milestones attached to it, anything like that, which is good to see. The space is maturing. Everyone is now thinking about, how does this work? How much money do you actually have?
Yeah.
That's one that I want to get into. I think what you guys have done is really interesting, is you almost have specific buckets allocated for specific projects. Can you sort of talk about how you've designed that and how that works? Because someone can see how much is almost still allocated.
Yeah. Well, a sandbox is a video game, right? So we took inspiration from a life bar of a character, and we thought, okay, we can have individual budget that are kind of a life bar. When your life bar is 0, you can't play anymore, right? Or you game over. And we thought that it was a cool way to gamify spending money. Which is like, if you people don't realize the impact of spending money, there's no education. They're just spending like crazy and just voting on stuff that really don't matter. But when you tell them, okay, look, by the way, we choose to allocate 100,000 to this particular project. Now you see the life bar is minus 100,000. It becomes very real very quickly. And you see the whole budget, and you see that there's a crunch of the life bar that is diminished. So for me, it was very important that we've got that transparency also going on, because people know what's our treasury and how it's being consumed, but also as a way to educate people to be wise when voting on something, or where accepting that money gets spent on a particular project, because they can see the impacts. Like, oh, if we're spending all the money we've got on charity, then we can't do charity anymore. So we better pick the good charity project as an example. And the second element of your question was, we've got different buckets. Why we've got different buckets? Simply because these are the major theme we think we would like people to vote upon, and we'll have to receive proposal that tied up to this particular bucket, as a way to making sure we don't receive proposals that are always about the same thing, making sure there's oh, okay, it's all about charity. Like, everybody's going to propose, as an example, everybody's going to make proposal about charity, but nobody's going to make proposal about content or new game or, whatever. And that way we believe that by having this fixed bucket, we can say, okay, there's actually other buckets you can use. So let's just try and diversify the type of proposal we're going to get by, again, being very transparent in, okay, there's 9 different buckets. Perhaps this is not enough. Perhaps the buckets are not the right one. Perhaps the budget is too high for one particular bucket and too low for the other one. Again, we'll figure this stuff out as we go into the next iteration of our budget. But our intent was really, we show transparency in a fun way, and we also kind of nudge people into, let's have a diversity into the type of proposal we're going to receive.
No, I think it's a very clever approach. I've seen teams struggle with this. I mean, some teams have done now seasons where in a specific season, this is the specific thing that we're focusing on. But also, as you said, you don't want only one type of proposal going through all the time. So it's a really good way to focus people, but also give them, this is the scope of things we want to build. Because, I mean, communities can sometimes focus on something that doesn't actually, you use donations. Donations are amazing, but if we're not building the product and we're only doing donations, that doesn't really help the team. So I think that's a really good idea. It's going to be fascinating to see, because I'm sure there are going to be some that get depleted very quickly and then some that don't get used. And that's going to be a very interesting experiment for you guys.
How do you learn from that? Does it mean the budget was too low for a certain category and too high for the other? Do you mean the community is only interested in this? So how can we perhaps write our own SIP, and ask partners to write SIP for this one, still submit it to the community? So how do we can diversify this whole thing and learn from doing? Right.
No, money is a very good feedback mechanism. I think this is a great feedback mechanism. I know you did a lot of research when you were setting this up, looking at legal entities, going through, should you have a legal entity, thinking through that whole process. Can you maybe, for folks that are considering doing this?
So I'm not legally trained and I'm no lawyer. Obviously I got a lot of help. And actually when I've joined this project, this was already kind of looked at. So there's a matrix that you can look at when deciding what is the best legal entity for your DAO. Again, not a lawyer, but I would recommend all DAOs to have some kind of a legal wrapper, because it provides some level of protection. And there's jurisdictions that are more adapted to the type of DAO you're going to get than others. So you can build a matrix, and there's some documentation out there. I think Aragon DAO has some stuff on their website that helps you choose the best legal entity. Basically, Cayman, Singapore, I think UK. You've got a couple of entities you can look at. And some of them are more applied to DeFi type DAO or community type DAO or utility type token. Depends also the type of token you've got, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of had a look into that, but we were very much set up from the start to be as safe as possible, to protect our community, to protect our council, to protect, this whole project. So we really wanted to do things by the book. But again, there's no book. Right. So we've done our best to really understand that space, and we had the chance to collaborate with amazing specialists that really help us make this decision. So that's why we've picked up Cayman as our the host for our foundation, which is the legal wrapper of the Sandbox DAO.
No, I think it's very, very practical reasons as well. Is if you need to pay grants, but someone might need fiat. You can open up a bank account, you can sign agreements with counterparties, you can make sure you can get everything done. Even if you're just hosting something, you can, as the foundation, now host your websites, different, control things. So I think that's one of the very interesting interactions between the community. But then for the community, getting things done is very hard, because traditionally what you see is community members will do things. But then you also have sort of a capture element. If there's a specific community member doing a very important thing, that's almost, that person has a lot of control. Where now with the foundation, you can have a legal entity doing specific functions. So I think it's part of the maturization of the space, and it's good to see. But then, as you say, getting people to understand it, getting good service providers is just as important. So who's your DAO admin? Do they understand it? Do they really get it? Who's your director? Does that person really understand it and get it? So it's a difficult process.
And we were chatting about this offline, is how do you select those people? What's the criteria? Again, there's no book. Like, how do you know director is the good one and service provider is a good one? How do you select your law firm for to protect your DAO? Like, how do you run those interviews? And it's really about, to me, at least my approach was a lot about asking people's advice. Surround yourself with a group of people that the collective intelligence will prevail at some point, even if nobody is like a specialist to recruit this particular type of people. You surround yourself with people with a good common sense, with the knowledge and skill set that are diverse enough that you believe collectively you're going to make the right decision. But it was funny. It was a funny exercise because no playbook, no past experience. Now, how do you figure this out? So, okay, it's soft skills are important, for example, and it's in the way you recruit those type of people, and it's about writing, like the way I've approached it. You write a job description, and you're like, okay, this person fits the job description, yes or no, even if you don't necessarily have a lot of experience. And it happens, when you grow as a manager in any company, at some point you have to recruit people that know more than you, that are smarter than you in a particular domain, but you still manage them. So how do you recruit for those people, and how you're going to make sure they will be a good fit to your team, that you can help them grow, that you're going to learn from them, they're going to bring something to the table, they're going to fit with the other team members. So those are generic principles you can apply to everything. So that was kind of my mentality going into this is, okay, I'm no lawyer, I'm no director of a DAO. Never done this before, but yet I have to recruit those people. So how do you choose them? Like, what's the grid? And that's how we've approached this thing.
No, it's interesting when I have conversations with clients as well. I mean, most people are in your shoes. This is the first time you're probably going to set up a foundation once.
Yeah.
We sort of do it as a living. So over the last few years, we've seen a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of things we know to look out for. So it's getting that, learning from other people's mistakes almost. And then, I mean, we're working on creating a bit of a database, almost as you say, because there are so many mistakes that remembering some of the older mistakes is hard as well. So it's that iterative process, and then so many new things. So you need people who can collaborate with you to say, okay, we've never seen this. How are we actually going to approach this?
Exactly. So that's what I meant by soft skills, is like, how do you, when you face with the problem that you never seen before, how do you react? Because it's easy to have people that are, okay, I've done this before, I know how to react, and I will solve this very efficiently for you because I've seen it many, many times. That's great skill set that you want to have those people. But what happens if you have a problem that nobody's faced before? Perhaps this person here is going to be disarmed and be like, I have no idea what to do. I've been following this playbook my whole life, and I've been building my own playbook. And now I'm like in the void or faced with the unknown, and I forgot how to react. So while you still need those people, you also need people that are, okay, let's figure this out. Like, you want to have people that be like, okay, let me take care of it for you. Like, I'll sort this out for you. I have no idea, but I'll figure it out. And that's the kind of people you also want in your team.
Or people who have the courage to throw around ideas. I think that's the big thing is, I mean, this is a human nature thing. Some people are afraid of sounding stupid. And some people will say things, and a lot of the time you get ideas out of those things. I've had that a lot of time where someone says something, you're like, well, legally we can't do that at all. But from that, you start thinking about, let's maybe, I mean, if you're doing an airdrop later on, for example, so not initially, but later on, can you do that? How does that work? How are you doing retroactive, contributions to people? If someone's done something really great, they didn't get paid up front, can you do that? So there's some really nice ideas that you get through that.
And it's about building a climate where people are benevolent enough, like a benevolent climate where people are not afraid to throw stupid ideas out there. And back to the entrepreneur spirit, right? This is building a foundation from scratch, building a DAO from scratch. You kind of have this you need to have a little bit of this pioneer/entrepreneur mentality. It's like, okay, I have no idea how to do this. I do have some idea, but I haven't done it to this scale. So how do we figure it out? So I think one of the core qualities you need to have is to be humbled, really to learn, and to have a climate where people want to collaborate with you. They want to work with you because they trust you as an individual. They won't feel judged when they will rise with maybe what they think is a stupid idea, but maybe not stupid at all, because you've built that climate where, okay, we kind of have to figure this out together. So there's no such thing as a stupid idea, and there's no such thing as a stupid question.
No, definitely agreed. Before we get into wrapping things up, in terms of setting up a DAO, anything else you think people should consider, or what are the things that you wish you knew when you started?
That's a good question. I've asked this question myself. Like when I started this, I was like trying to meet with other fellow DAO people. Like, okay, tell me what have you done? What should I know? The stuff that came back mostly is set up your foundation, right? Because you'll be protected. Find a way to involve your community as soon as possible. So yeah, and I would say, where did I stumble on this project? Because I've done a bit of research. Is like trying to meet with as fellow DAO peers as you can, even though there's not a lot of people, and trying to learn from them as much as possible. And maybe you don't have to start from scratch. Maybe you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Perhaps there's some stuff they can help you get going faster. And yeah, just there's no silver bullet. There's no playbook. There's no magic wand. There's none of that. All right. So yeah, the best counsel, my best advice to the new DAO person out there: be curious, think about the legal aspect, get accompanied very quickly, um, and be ready to speak with a lot of people that are completely different from your skill set, right? Be comfortable talking to lawyers, to finance people, to auditors, to blockchain, to cybersecurity people, to community manager, to like be ready to talk to all of these people, and don't stay in your own bubble. Like, get as much information as you can from all of the all of the different department that exists, that gravitates around DAO and crypto project in general, because you will need them at some point, sooner rather than later. So yeah, get comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And we discussed this earlier. It's such a diverse skill set almost.
Yeah,
You learn about a lot of things from, almost how democracies work to custody
yeah,
to so many other things. So you need to be open to learning.
exactly,
And then it keeps on changing as well.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you can't make this work if you're not curious.
No.
You have to be curious. You can't be like, oh, my interest is only in blockchain, and I'd like to write smart contract for a living. Because if you don't pay attention to law, to finance, to all of the other aspects, your DAO will be flawed. So you really have to be willing to collaborate with so many people. And that's what I meant by having this entrepreneur spirit, because building a DAO it's like building a blockchain company from scratch. You touch with every aspect, like in the case of the sandbox, the game, how the game is going to interact with the DAO. We're talking about the game jam before. So I'm talking to people that work actually on the product, work on the game, work on the game jam, and how we can work together, which I had no idea, right? So be willing to embrace as many different department, the art team, where we need to now make artwork for the DAO. Oh, okay, how do you brief an art team? I'll write a brief for an art team. Something completely different as well from what I used to do. So
no, I think I see with especially technical founders a lot of the time.
yeah,
really technical, amazing code, but it's not build it and they will come. Unfortunately, you need to understand the marketing, understand the community, all those things, and that's where you need to surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah, indeed.
To wrap up, I always ask, in the space at the moment, what are you excited about?
I'm excited to see. And it's going to sound a bit boring, but I've been seeing people trying to bridge AI and Web3, because Web3 was very popular a few years ago. Now it's AI, and some of the Web3 projects don't see the same backing as they used to, with crazy, investment and funding, etc., etc. So I'm excited to see how, which I consider being the two most innovative space right now. And I obviously I don't know about medicine and any of that stuff, but at least in my own bubble, that's what I see is AI and Web3. And I'm curious to see how one can help the other one. Like we saw ChatGPT, I don't know if you realize, but a week ago it was completely out. That was interesting to see. And some of the comment was like, oh, this would have never happened if people were using Ethereum blockchain, because it's a decentralized computer and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, interesting, but you realize how much computing power that ChatGPT requires. And is there even possible unless everybody has like a massive professional rig at home to make it run? But I would see, but I thought it was a fair question. Like, okay, how Web3 can solve this issue, and how also we can apply some of the AI principle to the Web3 community, and how we can cross those bridges together. So I would say that's one of the things that excites me. With regards to the Web3 project in general, the other key component for me would be how do we bring more people to the Web3? I don't know if you ever try to explain to your parents what you do for a living. It's always a fun conversation. Or to my grandma. My grandma, she's, bless her, but it's almost impossible. Like, I do project management, grandma. That's it. It's very difficult, right, to explain what we do, especially where there's no real title, and there's no school, there's nothing of the sort. So for me, the next challenge with blockchain technology is how do we bring more Web2 people in, and how we simplify that gap between I'm comfortable operating in a Web2 space, and now I need to operate in a Web3 space, but without realizing that I'm in Web3 space, because Web3 is ultimately just a tool, right? You don't have to know about website design to be able to use a website. You just use a website, or you use an app on your phone. You don't care about how it's done and how it's working. The fact that it's like scripts and everything behind it, you don't really care. Or you use AI on your day to day, and you don't really know about machine learning, and you wouldn't know how to program it. And that's, I still feel like in Web3, you cannot use our technology if you don't understand at least some stuff about it, or you're going to get scammed. And we don't want that.
Yes.
Right. So for me, it's like, how to resolve that gap. And I've seen the Sandbox doing something interesting where you can get to play the game without having any wallet. But if you want to get to the next level, which is buying avatars and owning your avatars and owning a piece of land, etc., then you have to open up a wallet, because this is all on crypto. But you can still play the game. So you see now, and we've seen like a debit card as well, how you can buy your bread. We're in France today, but how you can buy your bread with your crypto. Ultimately, that would be the ultimate thing for crypto to do, right? Like, how do you bring that technology to your day-to-day world? I was speaking to my in-laws the other day, and they were like, okay, it's the crypto thing, it's good, but I still can't pay my rent with crypto, right? So what's the point? I'm like, it's a fair statement. Like, and to me, that's what I'm excited about. It's like, we have a great technology that has proven to be robust. How we can put this technology in the hands of as many people as possible, so we don't think about the technology anymore, but we just think about the use cases around it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's the one thing I think, especially when you're working in this industry, you don't realize how early we are. I mean, this is still very nascent, very early, and we haven't hit the mass adoption. I mean, we had multiple cycles, but we haven't hit it yet. And I always say it isn't, we're not at a stage where my mom can use it yet. So it's almost to your grandma example. It's not as easy for people to understand, but we will get there. And I think that's what's exciting about this. To not only talk about the positive, what are you concerned about in the industry?
Bubbles, I would say. I still feel like we are there's some unnecessary hype that happens in the crypto space. That is, but that's because this is not as mature as Web2. So we saw the internet bubble. Don't exactly remember when, but it was like 10 or 15 years ago. The bubble bursted, and there was a lot of startups that failed. And I feel like we are not in a bubble with Web3, but there's still a lot of hype around project and people that are not necessarily mature to do proper due diligence, and or meme coins or scams and stuff that is here. Meme coins are important because to me it's not about the interesting value of a meme coin. It's more what it brings as a culture, as a cultural artifact, and how as humanity we need culture, right? And so they have value in that aspect. But scams is a big problem in the crypto space, and this is still happening. This is still some scams. People are trying to airdrop some stuff that they shouldn't. Like, I don't know if you. Every time I transact on Polygon, I receive like tons of NFTs all of a sudden with like airdrop this and airdrop that, and that's, to me, that's a concern, because I can still see this happening. I'd like this to be solved at some point. I don't know how. But we are still in a place where we are fairly immature that this stuff is still happening. And to be honest, that's perhaps the only thing I like about being in a bear market as opposed to the bull market. Is in the bear market, only the strongest projects survive, right? And that eliminates most of these scams, and because they're not strong enough to survive a bear market, they flourish in the bull market. But in a bear market, it's more difficult. So only the real strong project with a value and good tech and vision and good team will survive. Where opportunities people that are here to scan their neighbor and make a quick, cash grab and disappeared in an island somewhere. They cannot survive in a bear market. So that's what I like about the bear market, at least. But that's mostly my concerns about the space. We need to mature. We need to carry on maturing. And I was in NFC Lisbon where we announced this DAO, and I was really pleased with the people I've met. I can see now we are maturing slowly, getting more and more reasonable, and the hype is important. But now we're also looking at strong project with real foundation, etc., etc. But we're not there yet.
No, I definitely agree with you. Sandbox has survived a few of these cycles, which shows it's a strong project. But I've worked with teams through these cycles, and the new teams, especially this cycle, are more mature. They are thinking about legal entity, all those things, which is good to see because it also gets longevity to those teams.
Yeah.
So they're thinking about treasury management. There's all kinds of things now that people need to consider, which is really good.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Cyril, it's been an amazing chat to you.
Pleasure.
If people want to learn more about Sandbox, if they want to interact, what's the best place for them to go to?
So the Sandbox game, sandbox.game, is when you want to go there and play the game, learn about the product, create your own game. We've got a bunch of tools. You can create your avatar, your assets more using the Vox Edit. You can create your game using the game maker. You can get to play other people's game, and you can just interact with the product. So this is the place to go. And if you're interested about the DAO, sandboxdao.com is the place to go when we talk about this is our vision, this is our our treasury, this is the current SIPs that are actually live for voting, and forum.sandboxdao.com is the place when you can go and interact with us, with fellow community members, ask questions, react, and just, I hope, have a good time.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, looking forward to this experiment.
Thank you
so much for coming on.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Good. Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Decentralized Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would really appreciate it if you could like and share this. If you got any value from it or find anything interesting, please just also follow us on YouTube or wherever you're listening to your podcasts. If you want to connect with me, you can just follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. The links are down in the description. And I'd also like to thank our partner for this episode, Lemma. Lemma assists DAOs and foundation governance companies to do their governance, operations, and all the admin tasks. If you really want to focus on building your community and building the project that you're working on, Lemma can take care of all the admin, all the really boring stuff, so you can focus on the important stuff. You can find a link to their page down in the description as well. I'll see you on the next episode.